Happy Perioperative Nurses Week. This week, we are highlighting perioperative nurses from across the globe so that we can get a glimpse of what it's like to be an OR nurse in different parts of the world. Today, we are going to New Zealand and we are speaking with Cassie Scott. Cassie, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Melanie. It's great to be with you.
I am so excited to get to talk to you and find out more about what it's like in your part of the world. I have never been to Australia, New Zealand, any of those places, even as a tourist, much less to work. So I'm very excited to learn more about what it's like where you are working. But let's start at the very beginning. Why don't you just go ahead and give everybody a little bit of an introduction about you and more about where you're from?
Yeah, sure. So I am originally from Australia, from Brisbane, though I haven't lived there for many years. I've been travelling the world for the last decade. I started my nursing career back in 2005. I graduated university in 2004, and that's coming up 20 years in a few
It
months'
goes by
time.
fast.
It's very crazy.
Yeah.
Can't believe it's happening. So yeah, I currently work in Dunedin, so it's on the South Island of New Zealand, and I'm one of the nursing managers here for the perioperative team, and we've got 13 operating theatres over 4 locations and about 150 nurses, so keeps me very busy.
It sounds like it. Okay, so let's go back to nursing school itself because nursing school is different depending on what part of the country you find yourself in. So I'm kind of curious if you can tell us a little bit about what nursing school was like for you and whether or not you got to see perioperative nursing when you were in school.
Yeah, so nursing school, I think, looking back on it, I was a very naive 17-year-old when I went into nursing school. I had an image in my mind of what nursing was going to be like. And I went there and I did, my first classes, and I loved the anatomy and the physiology, all those sort of things. And then I went on my first placement and I was on a orthopedic surgical ward. And it's actually nothing like I thought it was going to be at all. And I hated it, to be honest. And my mother said to me, no, you're sticking at it for at least another prac just to see how, if there was something else, it might have just been the ward or what. And so I did my mental health placement and I loved that. And I'm so glad I did stick with it because then my next placement following that was the operating theatre or the OR. And it was just fantastic. I loved it. And I thought, right, this is for me. I'm hooked. So I'm glad. But yeah, no, it was we did have an exposure to the operating room in our placements, so that was fantastic. Well, it was great for me because it's where I ended up.
Yeah, that is awesome. Did you go straight to the OR out of nursing school?
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
So
I'm
I was
jealous.
really lucky.
Yeah.
I was really lucky when I graduated university. I got my first placement, my first job offer, and it was my first preference in the operating theatre.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
yeah,
Yeah, so
it was
some of us aren't
great.
so fortunate, and there's a lot of misconceptions, at least in the States, that we're trying to dispel when it comes to being able to be a new grad and be in the OR. So I love that you got to be a new grad and go right into the OR. But
Yeah.
what's training like? You were in Australia, right, when you started in the operating
Yes.
room? So how did they
Yes.
train you?
It was quite a comprehensive course, but I say it's course, but it was more of a program. It was 12 months and
Oh,
you did
wow.
all aspects of the perioperative journey. So we did, so in the Southern Hemisphere, nurses do scrub and circulate. And then we also did the anaesthetic assisting role as well as the post-anaesthetic care unit. So my graduate program was part, you did all of those aspects of the perioperative journey, which is great because it
Yeah.
gave a really good rounding and an understanding of, each part of the patient journey. So yeah, and then after that, obviously I specialised in scrub circulating though, in years gone past, as I progressed through my career, I have sort of done other parts, in other
Yeah.
areas that I've worked.
Okay, so I'm curious. You did a 12-month long almost like internship, right?
Yeah,
And you
you
were
could
like
say
a
that.
graduate nurse intern program. And so were you assigned a preceptor? Was this a graduate or an intern class? Were there several of you, or was it just a one-on-one thing? How did that work?
Yeah, so there were several of us. I think maybe in my intake there was maybe 4 or 5 nurses that
Mhm.
started with me. We were all assigned preceptors, so I had some fantastic preceptors, and I think it's most probably shaped me to be the nurse that
Yeah.
I am now, right? I had some really, they were tough, and they
Yeah.
had very clear expectations, but I think that's fantastic. They were charge nurses. I think of thinking back, this is 20 years ago, I'm thinking back here, but they were, there was a neurology, like a neurosurgery charge nurse, and also an orthopedic nurse. So I had some really good sort of exposure to some big cases. And like I
Yeah.
said, they were quite tough, but obviously not horrible. But they
Yeah.
had really clear expectations as to what they expected of perioperative nurses. So,
Yeah.
the whole sort of be prepared, know what you're going into before the next day you look at your list and what your assignment is for the operating theatre for the next day. So know what your cases are, know what you've so basically you have an understanding of what the case is before you walk in there and start
Yeah.
scrubbing for it. So and it was always that uh encouraging me to be inquisitive, to ask the questions. And so you got the greater understanding because, the better understanding that you have, it sort of translates to better patient care.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So did you feel like you ran into any of the nurses eat their young kind of experience that other new grads talk about?
Oh, I mean, obviously over the years, there's always I think I'd be lying to say that I've never experienced that because I think that is the case. I think things have certainly changed over the last 20 years, though, and certainly as I progressed to be a senior nurse, I also sort of, you take your history, right, and the
Hmm.
way that you've been treated. And I'm very aware of the way that I've been treated in certain situations over the last, 2 decades. And I guess you become more aware and the kind of nurse that you want to be, and I guess the person that you want to be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. No, definitely some personal awareness feeds into how we treat the younger generation for sure. And I'm
Yeah.
curious, you've been a traveler as well. And so you've worked in different places besides Australia, and now you're in New Zealand. But what other countries have you worked in?
Yeah, so I've also worked in Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. I worked on the West Coast in a city called Sligo. So that was great. And then I've also worked in the UK as well. So
Interesting.
we're country number 4 now.
Okay, so I'm curious. Ireland, their accent is much different than the Australian or New Zealand accent. Did you have trouble communicating when you were in Ireland? Did you understand it okay?
No, I tell you what, the biggest problem I had was pronouncing names.
I can imagine. Definitely. So go ahead.
No, I was just, it's funny because I have this, obviously I have this strong Australian accent, but I think I sound the same as everybody else. And so I just think I'm like fitting into this new hospital and they're like, oh, you're not from around here.
Yeah, our accent gives us away very quickly. It's when I try to tell people I'm not from the South and they're like, "Oh, honey, you are." Like, yeah, I know. You can hear it. But okay, so when you were in Ireland, you were in the UK or New Zealand and Australia, obviously there were some different practices that you noticed in the different countries that you worked in, right? What were some
Yeah,
of those differences that you saw?
I think first of all, I would like to say that I think there's more that we have in common than what we
Awesome.
have differences. And I think that really at the end of the day, I think really the main difference would be the difference in like monetary funding for
Hmm.
hospitals. So I've worked at state of the art hospitals with every resource that you can imagine. And then I've worked in other hospitals where, you don't have those resources. And so that comes its own challenges. But I think at the end of the day, that's most probably really where it lied. That's really where the difference lies is the money and the
Oh,
budgets.
yeah.
Um, and because I think really most of, all of the team are there for the same reason. They're there to, be the patient advocate, be there to support a patient during the most vulnerable time, arguably of their life. So I feel that really we do have more in common than what we
Yeah.
have different.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that was actually going to be my next question, which fed into it very well that we have a foundation that's the same no matter where we find ourselves working. Although We all run into the OR with our different communication or different names that we have for instruments or different
Yes.
names that we have for different pieces of equipment. Did you ever run into a communication difference with what you called an instrument versus what someone else did?
Oh, definitely over the years. And even, like the difference between Australia and New Zealand, and, obviously surgeons call things,
They
they
make
just
it
make
up, I think.
So, they'll be like, I can't even give an example. Like there's just been so many over the years, but yeah,
Yeah.
of course it's always, but then again, the other thing though is you tend to, I very much am all for being, when I'm scrubbing or even when I'm circulating, I'm always watching and I'm trying to anticipate and trying to, I try to have a good understanding of what the procedure is and what they're going to do next.
Right.
So although it might be a pair of forceps that they need and it may be something else, it may be called something else, that it's going to be a pair of forceps, right? So you've got a good idea of what it is. You're like, is it this one? Is it this one?
Yeah, we actually just did that the other day in a case, and the surgeon actually said, "Don't give me what I ask for, give me what I
Yeah.
need." And so we're like, "Okay, well, here we are. This is what you need, not what you asked for." So yes, I think we experience that. It's just no matter where we are in the operating room. But as we come to the end of this conversation and just hearing about your experience, the different places you've worked, and as we celebrate Perioperative Nurses Week, do you have any advice or encouragement that you want to share with any of the other nurses who are watching?
The OR is such a great place to work. The camaraderie you build with your teammates and your colleagues, it's hard to find anywhere else in the hospital. As I said, you're caring for your patients at the most vulnerable time, and that is really such an extreme privilege to have. And you go through the extreme lows and the highs, which is associated with our field of work. So I think also too, building the rapport with the patients and having that connection is something that is so powerful for the patient, and it's something that they really, really appreciate. So I think also people wanting to go into the OR, it's a field that where every day's different, every day's new. So, it's almost like, end of the day, you wipe the canvas and then you start again.
Exactly.
And you're always learning. There's always new technologies, and everyone's lifelong learners. So I'm still learning 20 years later. So I think ask questions, ask a million questions. No one's ever going to get angry at you. Well, they shouldn't get angry at you for
Exactly.
asking questions. Never stop advocating for your patients. And if you're in doubt, the question that I always ask is, would I be happy with this practice if this was my loved one on the table?
That is excellent insight and advice. Thank you, Cassie, so much for taking the
It's
time to talk to us today. I really appreciate it.
been great. I've really
Awesome.
appreciated it. It's been so good to talk to you.
I
And,
know this has been
therapy
wonderful.
is
So that is going to do it for our interview for today. Tune in tomorrow for another OR Nurse Spotlight. I'm your host, Melanie Perry, and on behalf of our whole team, thanks for tuning in to First Case.